Facebook. There we all are. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sacred Sunday. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas with three amazing, compassionate communicators. And today is Sunday, January 7th, 2021. And it's 3 days before the inauguration of a new president, and also a day that a lot of the people who were disappointed, angry with the election result, not believing the election result, are planning demonstrations. And so we're dedicating our Sacred Sunday to how to really listen to people that have opposing political or spiritual beliefs. And I'm really, really proud that we've got an amazing group of people. All three of these are very well, long-term experienced compassionate communicators. We all are students of Marshall Rosenberg. Paul, John, and I had the pleasure to work with him directly. Katrina has studied him very much. So anyway, let me introduce everybody. And I don't have professional full bios. I'm just going to kind of base it on my experience with people. This is John Kenyon, who is one of the most respected teachers, facilitators, mediators of nonviolent communication. Welcome, John. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Scott.
And this is one of my best friends for a very, very long time. This is Katrina Valancourt, co-founder of Love Coach Academy, and also the creator of the Love Smart cards, and a very prominent nonviolent communication teacher. And this is also a longtime friend of mine who's living in my home at this time. Paul Sterling, the author. Well, go ahead, put it up so we can all see it. Argue Less, Love More, best-selling book, and a tremendous teacher of compassionate communication. So it's really a wonderful group. We are going to take any questions that people have. I'll periodically, while others are speaking, be checking what's happening on Facebook and also what's happening in our Zoom room. And you all, if you are watching on Facebook right now, you can still come into our Zoom room, and I will post that link shortly. And you can actually go right now to Facebook. It's my profile page because the link is already there, if you want to come to the Zoom room to more easily directly interact with us. It's the Sacred Sunday show, and so we are going to start with prayer. And so I invite everybody who's listening, whether you're listening live or whether you are watching the replay, let's just slow down. And unless you're operating a motor vehicle, as Reverend Michael always says in his meditations, let's just close our eyes and let's take a few breaths together. Slowing down and going inside, going within. And perhaps with every inhale, coming more and more into your center, just letting my voice gently guide you. Exhale, letting go. As we tune into ourself, how is your body informing you right now? As you slow down and feel your body, are there any physical sensations? Any physical discomfort that needs a little alleviation or nurturing or awareness? Are there any emotions, feelings that you notice? Just acknowledging our body temples, all the ways they serve us, and always good to just listen to our body. And in the spirit of listening, that's what our show is dedicated to this morning, today. How can we listen, even when what we're hearing is hard to hear? How to manage our judgments, our projections, our fears. And so in this prayer, praying for all of us to learn how to open our hearts and open our minds and develop our ability to listen with compassion, seeking to understand. So a prayer for our country. May we find ways to stop the polarization in our own lives. Learn how to connect more fully with those who have different beliefs, spiritual or political, cultural. Bless us that we may be the change we want to see in the world. Maximum grace for each of us as individuals, maximum grace for the families that we are a part of, maximum grace for our country. Aho, Ashe. Amen. I'm going to invite each of my wonderful guests just to provide an opening thought, whatever you want to share on this topic. And we'll start with John.
Yeah, I thought of a way to open together that like a big picture framing that I'm finding really helpful lately is to think of what we're all, the four of us, do with communication. It's really about language, like the phenomena of human language, and how, going all the way back to the beginnings of our human evolution, the way language has, we've gone from just the body language. Scott, in the prayer, you talked a lot about the body. So I imagine just for the longest time, we just communicated with our bodies and sounds, and then it became more about images and pictures, and then concepts and verbal linguistic language, and the way that language just has evolved. And the insight that our teacher, mentor Marshall Rosenberg, saw was that language can take these, one way to look at language, it can take these two very fundamentally different sort of shapes or forms, like, and one way of the language actually supports us just staying in connection. I think we're naturally wired for connection and empathy and compassion, but we can easily get triggered away from that. But language that really supports staying in that connected place and that open, kind of warm, caring, friendly, cooperative space. So that language that really keeps pointing us there. And then language can point us in the opposite direction. We can, Scott, last night you talked about enemy images, and Marshall often talked about that. So our language can kind of, and language just is like the prism that we look through, we experience reality through. And that this other form that language can take takes us into disconnection and separation, like total separation, and suffering and violence and even domination. So Marshall often talked about the systems of domination that get created in the world. And as we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, it was all about kind of systemic oppression and ways to be aware of that and try to change that. So, but language, to see that language itself is at the one way to look at the core of that suffering and violence we get into, or the love and connection and caring for each other. And it's just, to me, just to know that that's sort of possible to see language that way. And we have choice. We have a choice of what language do we want to use that can help us get back to more connection. So maybe that's a place to kind of invite others to share from.
Oh, thank you, John. And we'll hear from Katrina and Paul in a second. But, since you brought up Marshall, just want to acknowledge our mentor. All four of us have in common that Marshall Rosenberg was a very important mentor for us. So there he is. Marshall passed away a few years ago. Um, and there's one of his wonderful quotes that really echoes what John just said. Every criticism, judgment, diagnosis, and expression of anger is the tragic expression of an unmet need. And I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit about that as we share, tools for how to manage all of this. So much of it is about understanding that. So thank you, John. Katrina, the spotlight's on you.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really appreciating what John was saying about language and, especially this choice that we have. We can stay inside of these concepts, which do include those judgments and diagnoses or enemy images, the way we label other people. Oftentimes putting us in, I'm good, you're bad, I'm right, you're wrong. Maybe I'm superior, you're inferior, or sometimes we flip those. Oh, I'm wrong. But all of those things happen inside of language. They're conceptual. They're things that can really pull us apart. And in order to come together, there is a language that can connect us. And I like to, it's so much of what nonviolent communication has taught the teachers here in this room. It's like the language of the heart, right? What am I feeling in here? What's alive in me? What's going on in you? From this place of like the emotional reality, can we understand that there are perceptions, understand that there are beliefs, understand that people had different upbringings that are influencing the way they experience life in different ways. And it's almost like we're getting to know almost like a creature from another planet. Can we try to release what we believe to be true, not forever, because we need to maintain our sense of self, but can we release it long enough to seek to enter into the reality of another person so that we have the ability to walk in their shoes, to go, oh, wow, you're seeing the world in that way. I would imagine if I were seeing the world in that way, I might be feeling these things. I might have these concerns. I might be wanting these things. And that's what builds the connection. You don't have to agree with it to understand it. Understanding does not equate agreement. It is connection. It's a way of building a bridge. So I know we'll be dropping into more of that as we talk about this topic today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Katrina. It's so, that right there is just like sums it up so beautifully. Mr. Sterling, what are your
Wow. Well, I love what everybody said so far. And I challenge one thing is they both said it's a choice. And what I want to say is it's not a choice until we actually have the distinctions. For most people, they don't think they have a choice. That's why I think this teaching is so important. It's like words are sounds that are made and we translate them into meanings. And one of the things that Marshall talked about is all communication is either an act of love or a cry for help. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it's helpful. And it helps me lean into other people's world and not take things personally. And I'll tell you a quick story that kind of sums it up. For 8.5 years, I was a volunteer and taught these tools in prison. And one time I had worked with maximum security inmates, these guys, for 2 days. And then the workshop's over, they're leaving, going back to their cells. And this guy stops like right here. And I'm heightened awareness in prison. And he starts backing up and I'm a little nervous. And he looks at me and he goes, Paul, if I had learned these tools in school, I wouldn't have spent 20 years in prison.
Wow.
And it's like to have the breakthroughs, for people to have the choices that Katrina and John talked about, we need to give them the tools, because most people don't think that it's possible to communicate this way. And you don't need these tools when it's easy. We need these tools when it's hard. That's when we need them. At this time when America is trying to choose, how are we going to be in the future? That's when we need these difficult tools. And it starts with our families, with the people we love, because families are being ripped apart because one family believes this and one family pro this. And so it's like, how can we find our common humanity again? And that's why I love this project. And I love these people that are so committed to helping us. And I wrote 3 things down: to listen courageously, to speak compassionately, and to be powerfully vulnerable. And that's when we put aside what Katrina was saying, when I put aside my beliefs for a moment to really be with you and go, wow, so that's how you see the world. And like, if I'm afraid, I'm looking for who is the threat. And like, how can we see each other as the United States of America, that we came together with all of our diverse colors and skins and genders and choices? How can we create a safe space for all of us? So I said a lot there, Scott, but thank you for creating this container.
Oh, beautiful. And really what all of you have said and shared so far is so powerful, so important. Thank you. I think the piece I want to add is, obviously we're teaching empathy and compassion. And for me, the most important form of empathy is self-empathy. And we really can't give empathy to others until we've managed ourselves. And so, like Paul said, it's like, it's easy for us to say these things, but then we get triggered and our reptile brain takes over and we can't do it. And so it's practice. And I just want to really acknowledge how important it is when we see something and we have that judgment. I'll kind of tell a vulnerable story. I met Marshall Rosenberg and was hired to produce, and I didn't know who he was. I met him through Lori Grace. Thank you, Lori. And I was hired to produce a series of videos with him. And so I traveled with him. And I'm still getting to know him, and I'm filming him. And one day over breakfast, who knows what it was I was saying, but he pointed his finger at me and he said, "You know what you are, Scott? You are a jackal, and you are a self-help jackal. You're trying to help everybody. You're trying to save everybody. You're trying to rescue everybody. And that's still jackal judgment. It's still jackal behavior." Jackal in nonviolent communication represents that part of us that judges or snipes at other people. And it was really embarrassing and totally accurate, totally honest, totally important for me to hear, and very valuable. And started for me the process of noticing when I'm in judgment. And it was really humbling, because I thought I was this wonderful spiritual guy. And I began to notice that I had anywhere from 50 to 100 judgmental thoughts every day. It was really like, oh my God, I had no idea how judgmental my thinking was. And so, and then comes the step of not judging ourselves for judging, but recognizing that every judgment, underneath that judgment is an unmet need, or a value that's being challenged, or a fear that we're not going to get what we need or want. And it's a whole process. It's a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. And I've been now teaching this for 20 years, and I still have judgmental thoughts every day, So it's learning how to work with it and how to have self-empathy. So we hear somebody saying something that is very different from our beliefs. We are almost always going to have that judgmental first thought. We're usually going to go, "That's ridiculous. What an idiot. That's bullshit." That usually is what happens first. And so we have to not say it, obviously. Notice it. Oh, there I go. I'm judging. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's not stay there. Take a breath. and give empathy. Okay, why am I judging? And this all goes on inside the brain. And you can learn how to do it pretty quickly, actually, right? Because it can be like, that's a crazy thought. Okay, well, I'm judging. Why do I think it's crazy? Well, it's different from what I believe. Okay, we're in different belief systems. Okay, what's his belief and why? Notice how fast that was? And that all can go on inside. Now, sometimes if it's more stronger, I need to go deeper into, well, what am I feeling? I'm feeling angry. That doesn't meet my values. Doesn't meet my value for respect. Doesn't, the way I'm interpreting that doesn't meet my value for respect. So I'm angry, frustrated. That still only took, what, 10 seconds to go inside. So learning how to acknowledge ourselves and our reaction and to manage it is an important step. And with that, I'll just go to gallery view and see who wants to share next. John?
Well, actually, yeah, I did. I thought of some things really to build on what you just said. Um, I, what's so helpful to me is to, again, this way to relate to language, and language is so automatic, right? I mean, just think about how over hundreds of thousands of years, like how language has just gotten so automatic for us. And so most of the time we're thinking and communicating without even being aware of it. So like what you're saying, Scott, is like, yeah, how to, being much more aware. And the way I like to do that is just as often as I can, sort of seeing that in the present moment, there's just this arising of words, of language that's happening. Like right now, the words from me are just happening, and I'm hearing them and you're hearing them. And Scott, just a little bit ago, your words were coming in for all of us, right? So there's just words happening within us and others, and just by it's almost like it's a shift of perspective of just, it's like a meditation to notice the arising of words, and that a lot of it is automatic that we can be aware of. And then Scott, what we were talking about, there actually is this capacity to consciously talk to ourselves. And I don't know that everybody really embraces that or kind of gets like how powerful that is, that we can talk to ourselves in a very alert, aware way. And like right now, as I'm talking, I can really listen to my own words, and we can do that silently, as you said, internally, but to do it in a way that we're both speaking and listening at the same time to our own words. And with that, we can then start focusing our language, our words in certain ways that are more predictably going to create connection, create empathy, create compassionate responses to things, create a way to cooperate or meet our needs. But just this ability to know we can sort of gently and even soothingly, comfortingly talk to ourselves about, what am I observing? What am I judging? How am I feeling in my body right now? What are those wants and needs and values that are so important? What do I want to ask for? So, as just building on what you said, Scott, this, if we can relate to language with mindfulness, with this talking to ourselves like very deliberately when we want to. So, you don't always have, but that we have that option. To me, and so the last thing I'll say, and then I'll hand it to my other colleagues, but I don't know if I'm saying it quite clearly, but that it's a shift to relating to language as something that arises in us in awareness, rather than being identified with it and totally lost inside of it. Because then we have no choice, as Paul, you said. But if we can experience it in a mindful, meditative kind of way, then wow, then we have this another layer of at least apparent choice, where all of that ultimately comes from as a mystery. But anyways, I'll see what Katrina and Paul, how you want to riff off of that.
Oh, I've got something that's immediately coming up for me as you say that. One of the pieces that I found very powerful was an interview between Oprah Winfrey and Eckhart Tolle from at least a year ago. And they're talking about politics in the United States. And what Eckhart Tolle said is that it's only when we become identified with our point of view that we make ourselves prone to engaging in the conflict, to going into that stress cycle. And so, John, what you're saying is that mindfulness, that's how I'm hearing it, that mindfulness that Eckhart Tolle was speaking to, like, oh, wow, I notice I'm having a reaction because I have become identified with a thought that I believe is right. So long as I maintain that identification, I'm playing into this dynamic of right and wrong and reactivity. Can I instead go into the mindfulness practice of like, oh, that's a thought. The same thing can happen with emotion. We can identify with our emotions. And this is a tricky one. It took me a while I was very identified with my emotions. But when I'm identified with my emotions, I lose a sense of choice. I'm angry. So words start flowing out because I'm angry right now. I have a choice. There's ways, of course, to calm those emotions. And mindfulness is one of those tools. So there's actually something new that I've been playing with this year, which is looking at what I might call my reaction meter. And I start to notice when my nervous system is getting wired, when I'm having a reactive comment as opposed to like sitting and going, and getting thoughtful and heartful in the way I want to respond. So I'm really watching my reaction meter. And if I notice that I'm starting to rise towards a reaction, then I look to see, okay, what can I do to calm it? And for me, one of the practices that has become essential with the turbulence that's happening around different belief systems is to have a morning meditation practice. And it makes a remarkable difference. The frenetic energy of my mental thoughts that can make me more prone to reaction are something that I can calm down and settle down through there's so many different mindfulness meditations. I'm currently direct experiencing with Craig Hamilton is something that's really working for me. So it calms that down, and then I have more choice about my thoughts. What do I want to bring to my day? Oh, I want to bring gratitude to my day. And I start to plant those seeds of thoughts, which then again reduce that tendency towards reactivity and increase my ability to empathize and to be responsive. So that was the piece that really came alive in me to share, riffing off of what you had shared, John.
Uh, I- I'd like to give a specific example of how this has worked for me. I was studying with Marshall at the same time my father was he was passing away. He was dying of asbestosis, which is a slow death, the hardening of the arteries. And anyway, I was back in Vermont with him. And my dad, Irish, alcoholic, recovering Catholic, somewhat angry. One of his things he said was the best defense is a strong offense. And he could be pretty offensive at times. And so I was excited. I was sharing my newfound love of compassionate, nonviolent communication with him. And we were watching TV at the time. And he looks at the TV and he goes, if Marshall was making a difference, he would be on TV. Now, this is coming from a guy that was at Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. We marched on Washington, I don't know how many times. So we really didn't believe in the TV and this whole structure. But he said something that cut right to my heart. And I got quiet because in my family, we were pretty sarcastic in our communication, and I got quiet. And what I had to do was what Scott said first and what everybody's been kind of, I had to talk to myself. And it's like, oh my God, my first internal thoughts is my dad is such an asshole. Why can't he be proud of me? And I was just like, and it took a minute, and I was able to communicate with myself and get curious. and give myself some empathy for how much pain it was. And then I looked at him and I said, I got curious, what would cause him to say that? And I realized he had dedicated his life to making a difference, to, the peace marches, the environment, the whole thing. And here he was, he knew he was dying. We all knew he was dying. And he was watching TV and it looked like nothing had changed. He had dedicated his life to making a difference and nothing had changed. And when I finally opened my mouth, and I know he thought I was just like thinking of the comeback. And instead I went, wow, I'm wondering if you're feeling really sad right now because you're seeing all this news on the TV and it doesn't look like anything's changed. And it just like went right to his heart. I found our common ground and I was able to enter it. But the only reason I had that choice is because I had spent the time with Marshall and learned that how to translate into the beautiful underlying feelings and needs. And it was an amazing thing. And we had several talks like that. So, what a profound gift. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I want to address some of the comments coming in, and we really love hearing from people watching. And thank you, John and Summer Raymer, for doing a sine wave. They've shared it out to about 75 groups and pages. So thank you. And most of you will see the video recording. So if you're watching the video replay, we still really want to hear from you. And we'll go back and take a look at your comments. So thank you. But right now, coming into from our Zoom room, Bonnie writes, one book that has become a part of my personal Bible is People Skills by Robert Bolton. Incredible teaching of listening skills. So thank you for that resource, Bonnie. John asks, Scott, what is the difference between opinion and judgment, if any? Good question. I'll address it, and then if any of you want to riff on that. So I love the word discernment because discernment is very, very important. And for me, when we have an opinion or a belief, and it can be precious to us, it goes into judgment when we feel the need to make somebody with a different opinion wrong, right? Or when we see something and we're making it wrong. So, and probably any of the other three can talk about the difference between an observation and a judgment. I'm imagining that might be where one of them might want to go. But just noticing that discernment is really important. We have choice, but learning how to make choice without judgment, without making somebody else and their choice bad, stupid, or wrong. And by the way, I want to acknowledge Paul Sterling, who came up with that wonderful phrase, no BSW, bad, stupid, or wrong. And what's great about that is those are the three words that pretty well cover most judgments. Most judgments that we have is making somebody bad or implying that they're stupid or wrong. How do we imply they're stupid? That's crazy. The moment we say, that's crazy, we've just told the person that they're stupid, they're wrong, right? So that's kind of my response, and I'm curious if any of our other speakers want to add to that, or I guess not.
I've got a different riff.
Okay,
well,
go ahead.
Let me just, I thought of one little thing and then go to Paul. One way to, the difference between opinion and judgment might be like opinion could be like you're holding it as like, oh, that's just my opinion, and we all have our opinions and we can't not have opinions. I mean, we can try, but we do, right? But that's sliding into, Scott, what you were talking, like where you just, it's not just an opinion. It's like, no, this is the way it is. You're wrong and I'm right. That's different than just saying I have an opinion. So Paul, maybe you were going to kind of go some other direction with that.
I was going to go a little bit different direction. What I'd love everybody to do is put your hand on your head. Okay, so one way we communicate from our head. So in our head, when we're in our head, it's all about judgments, right, wrong, good, bad. And vulnerability is weakness there. Now move your hand to your heart. And this for all you listeners out there. So what's critical when we're in our heart is feelings and needs and connection and intimacy. So what's happening is I'm listening for, when I'm in my head, I'm listening for facts and figures. When I'm in my heart, I'm listening for feelings and needs and connections. And then if I put my hand on the back of my neck, it's like that's where a reptile brain is. And that's where fear, and I'm looking for danger and safety. Who's the enemy? Who's the ally? When I'm triggered in here, it's like I have three different ways that I translate. When I'm in my head, I'm translating everything into facts and figures, and who cares about how you feel? When I'm in my heart, it's all about connection and how are you feeling? Are you feeling scared right now? Oh, let me lean in. And then here it's like, where's danger? Where's safety? And the more triggered I am, the more reactive I am. And I need to, like Katrina said earlier, that morning meditation, I do a daily bike ride if I can, because it calms my nervous system down and I'm less likely to get into the reptile brain. I'm more likely to spend time in my heart or my head. And it's like, where am I speaking from? And where am I listening from? And this is a critical thing. If you want to connect with people, listening from the heart is so essential. So that's where I was going with it. And when I go to judgments, it's like I'm in my head or I'm in my reptile brain. If I'm really afraid, it's like I get rigid in my communication.
This is all so important. Thank you. I am going to kind of focus a little bit on some of the thoughts and comments and questions coming in. Bonnie adds, Feast of the Soul is one program going on for 40 days. Today is day 3 for morning meditation and prayer around the world. So thank you for that reminder. And Carol Weekly, who's one of our regular viewers, hello Carol, writes, I agree with the concept of reaction meter. However, I'm realizing that sometimes I will not feel my negative emotions. I'm trying to make sure I do not gloss over these negative thoughts to really feel them and then move forward. So I want to address that for a moment, because one of the things that's interesting to notice is that you called it negative emotions. And so first of all, thank you, Carol. I'm really glad you brought it up. And what I'm about to say is not to make you wrong. But we grow up in a culture that teaches us that there are good emotions and bad emotions, positive feelings and negative feelings. And one of the things that I learned from Marshall Rosenberg is there's no such thing as a bad feeling or a negative emotion. They're uncomfortable, but they're part of life. And almost all of us have been trained to avoid certain uncomfortable emotions. And then there we go. Because it's uncomfortable, we label it as bad or negative. And yeah, anger is really uncomfortable. Sadness, frustration, confusion are uncomfortable. But when we can learn how to manage, to acknowledge, we have to start by acknowledging it, acknowledging that uncomfortable emotion, and then feeling that uncomfortable emotion. And then again, the beautiful thing that Marshall taught us is we don't have to stay in the uncomfortable emotion. We can ask what's underneath it, because always underneath our uncomfortable feelings are unmet needs, unmet values. Paul and I both taught in the prison system, and most of those guys are angry all the time. Now, we can just judge them as a bunch of angry convicts, or recognize, of course, they're angry. They have so many unmet needs, so many unmet values. So again, that's the thing to remember, is when we want to learn how to be more present to our uncomfortable feelings or somebody else's uncomfortable feelings, underneath that anger, underneath that sadness, underneath that confusion or overwhelm or frustration or agitation or whatever it is, what are the unmet needs? What are the unmet values? And again, it's of course a fundamental foundational teaching of nonviolent communication. So thank you, Carol, for your vulnerably bringing that up. And we'll go back to our incredible panel here. Wherever you want to go next.
There's something I felt moved to share, and it's a riff from Carol, because it's a different way to look at some of these emotions. one of the things I understand is for Carol, sometimes it's hard to feel those emotions that are uncomfortable. And I wanted to acknowledge that there's also people who can get stuck in emotions that feel uncomfortable. And then their mind can give more reasons for to validate that emotion and kind of create a cycle where you can get caught. And if you get caught in a cycle of fear or a cycle of anger, one great tool, as Scott had shared, is to look at what are the needs underneath that. And yet sometimes you might discover that there's and I'm sharing, this is something that I need to work with in myself. Sometimes I will project out a fear into the future. So I've got fear going on. My mind will validate that fear. I have, needs for safety underlying that fear, but it's not actually based in what's happening here and now. And so, so this is not something for Carol, but it is a tool that can be really helpful for people who might recognize, like, oh, what I'm afraid of or what I'm angry about is not actually here right now in this present moment. I might be in a cycle of fear. Eckhart Tolle might call it a pain body. In which case, if you find yourself in one of those cycles, again, just being like, okay, well, let me feel it. Let me really feel it is a tool that has worked for me. So that would be like closing my eyes and going, okay, what does this feel like in my body? What is the energy in my body? And by putting my attention on it, I've actually been able to provide myself with a sense of safety I need to calm the fear. It's not by addressing something in the outer world, but it's actually by going, okay, there's nothing actually directly in my outer world right now. So this is my inner work. Let me simply witness it. Sometimes it can take time to be present enough with it that it shifts and it calms, but it does shift and calm. So again, doesn't sound like it's Carol's challenge, but I do imagine there are people who are watching who might relate to that spin. And I wanted to give a tool that can help you to shift back into your center.
Beautiful. Thank you, Katrina. Thank you.
Scott, I thought of one little riff off of what you brought up around the feelings. Are you wanting to go anywhere else in this moment, or is there?
No,
I'll make it brief because I do want to. I want to cover lots of things that people have questions about, but just this the emotion we could notice or the feeling can also tell us a lot about what we're thinking and if we're judging. So we can feel things that feel a lot like suffering. Now that we don't, if we label that as bad, that's not helpful, or negative, but there is a quality of feeling that's really suffering, right? Psychological, emotional suffering. And the link between that and how, and a certain kind of language and thinking, like thinking and who's right and wrong, good and bad, and who deserves to be punished or rewarded, right? And when we're thinking that way, we often feel bad in that sense. And it can just be a wake up call to us, like, oh, if I'm feeling anger and rage and hatred or guilt and shame, that's just, withering self-blame or, hostility and all, okay, like, oh man, what am I thinking? What's going on in my mind that's related to that? And then dropping into the needs that you all been talking about. And some people might not know what needs are so I just want to say real quick, maybe guide people listening for just a moment into the needs. So I just invite you to, if you're listening, just tune into your body and whatever you're feeling right now, whatever that might be. And you might not even have words for it, what's happening in your body, sensations, emotions. And then see if you can link that to what you're wanting. Let's just use the word want, because some people aren't maybe know exactly what we mean by need. So what do you want right now just asking yourself internally, what are you wanting right now that all of us human beings want? You can imagine everywhere around the world that we all want the same qualities like love or safety or respect or beauty or companionship, community. So, and the language is really interesting here. Certain words just capture something essential that then maybe something in our unconscious goes, ah, that's it. That's what I'm really wanting and needing. So the difference between like, I want my partner to say certain things to me or do certain things versus I want love. I want empathy. I want kindness, right? Getting ultimately to that level where we all want these basic qualities. And we can imagine everyone on the planet wanting that with us. So we're not alone. We're not disconnected. We're actually connected through what we all want at that very universal level. And we can feel kind of expansive energy, aliveness with that level of our wanting and needing. So it's not needing a particular thing or person or anything. It's just needing these universal qualities. And when we find the language that really resonates, our whole body can just shift and soften and open. And go, oh, even if we're really upset, we can find that Marshall called it sweet pain, the sweet pain of loss or whatever unmet needs are happening. But it's really different when we're deeply connected to those universal qualities. So Scott, back to you.
Oh, John, that was awesome. That was really, really lovely. And I'm going to riff on it briefly, and then we've got a really powerful question that's come in. But just riffing on it, I want to acknowledge Robert Gonzalez, who's another wonderful teacher of nonviolent communication. And he coined a beautiful phrase for what John just described: the beauty of the unmet need, right? And it's kind of a paradoxical thought, but it's another way of looking at what John just said. When we have uncomfortable emotions, it's because we have an unmet need, unmet value. But whatever that is, our need for respect hasn't been met. Our need for companionship or intimacy hasn't been met. The need itself is actually beautiful. Intimacy is beautiful. Respect is beautiful. All those needs are the needs themselves, the values themselves are beautiful. And it's the longing, right? So if we can drop out of the discomfort of not having it met and remember the beauty of the longing, the beauty of the need itself. So thank you so much, John. All right. Well, I just got a private message from someone. So this is going to be a chance for us to take what we're teaching and apply it. And I want to really thank you, and you know who you are. This person's asked to be anonymous, so she sent me a private message. My son has swallowed the red pill and believes that Q is real, and anyone who doesn't believe what's coming through that form of information is delusional or deceived or lost in the old paradigm. This has caused tremendous friction, and my son and his father are no longer speaking to each other. I'm in the middle. How do I manage this? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think all three of us can dive into this one, but it's like, if you think about it, first, self-empathy, because I'm imagining if I was the parent there, that it would be heartbreaking, that I have a beautiful need to be connected with my son and the son's father. I don't know whether they're still in a relationship or not, but it's like, and then to try to slowly translate my feelings and needs and then lean into their world and be curious about the son. Because the more that we resist letting it in, the more that they try to force it. So I'll just give people, I'm going to ask for a quick exercise here. So everybody put your hands together like this. So if I could ask my panelists to do this too. So when I say go, press really hard with your right hand. Get ready, get set, go. No, press harder, press harder, press harder. Oh, you guys moved a little bit there. Now, God, I'm going to pick on you for a second because the other ones moved. So I asked you to press really hard with your right hand. What did your left hand do?
It pressed right back, just as hard.
Just as hard. So why this is important in this scenario is the more that we try to force our opinion on somebody else, the more resistance we get back. So it's to lean in rather than prove whether Q is right or wrong, but it's like, wow, what precious needs, what opened up for you in hearing this, and what opened up for the father? Because one of the things we talk about in across the aisle is understanding doesn't equal agreement. And the more that we resist understanding what precious need they're going to be trying to meet here, the more resistance they're going to come back, and the more they're going to try to prove their point. But if we can lean in to both of them, but first give ourselves compassion, like Katrina, I think, was saying that earlier, first compassion to ourselves, because this is really terrifying for people. And it's like we've gone from the point where I'm voting Democratic or I'm voting Republican to I am a Democrat or I am a Republican or I am Q. No, we're not. If we get dissected when we die, there's not like a D or an R or, it's like it's a current belief system. Let's lean in and go, wow, I'm excited that you believe this. This is serving you. What precious need. So that's my take on it. I'm sure that there's tons more wisdom with my co whatever.
John, Katrina, I'd love to hear from both of you. So who wants to go first? Katrina.
Goodness. Yeah, I mean, first of all, my heart goes out to you. Sometimes I wear my heart on my sleeve. So yeah, to no doubt love your son and your husband as much as you do, and to be in this challenge, it's serious. I would imagine that really focusing on your connection with your son is going to be the first place to go. Trying to work things out between him and his dad right now, that's a hard deal. You've got enough on your own plate, and your bond with your son is very important. Excuse me.
Thank you, Katrina. Your tears are very welcome.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Paul said about lean into understanding. I don't know that I would go so far as to say, I really celebrate what you're exploring. I'm not sure. But there is a place for saying, I can see you have a lot of enthusiasm for some things you're discovering. And, to be honest, there's things you're sharing with me that they don't ring true to me. The sources I'm seeing, and I understand you're seeing different sources. So the sources I'm seeing, you probably won't agree with either. The sources I'm seeing just go very contrary to what you're seeing. But I get that this is exciting for you. I get that it's compelling for you, and that you believe that there's truth here. And, I'd be open. We can set aside time. I only have so much capacity. I'm guessing that this is true for you. Oftentimes the enthusiasm of people who have swallowed the red pill can be overwhelming. And so it's like, okay, I can take it in small chunks, but then I kind of reach my limit. So you could offer, I would be willing to set aside some time for us to sit down and for you to show me what you find to be the most compelling pieces, so that I can really get a better understanding of why this is so important to you. Our bond is so important to me. You're my son. I love you. We need to turn to someone else. I gotta pull myself together.
Thank you, Katrina.
You want me to go, Katrina?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll just build on what my two friends three, actually, Scott starting us off here, which are saying, and add another piece about what I like calling empathic structure. Empathic structure. So what we have seen in our across the aisle process, we bring a certain structure to that supports people. It's like a container, like a sacred container in a way, where the intention is to try to hear each other. But it doesn't have to be, it can be in any context, but the setting of a kind of like, hey, can we have a conversation in a bit of a different way than normal? Just like usual I call ping pong conversation, where you're just back and forth and obviously kind of trading sort of, I think this, but I think that, and I've heard this. But instead just sort of say, okay, like, how about we do it a little differently, where we really take turns speaking and listening. And when it's your turn to speak, I'm going to really try to listen and understand. And then then it's my turn, I'd love it if you could do that for me. But just inviting with a one-on-one or a group setting, whatever it is, that kind of structure that supports slowing down, really trying to hear and get to some of these deeper layers that we've been talking about today. I think it's really hard to have a difficult conversation without that kind of structure. I've been doing this work for over 20 years. With certain conversations, they're so triggering for me, and I'm seeing nodding heads and our panelists, right? Like, we lose our skills so quickly, even if we have tons of skill. We're like, it's out the window. What Paul said, the amygdala, the back of the brain, the brain stem takes over. So to have a structure, it could be a light one. It doesn't have to be a heavy structure, but a light kind of like, hey, let's frame this in a certain way. Let's do this in a way that slows down and really allows us to hear each other differently. Like, I don't know how to do it other than that if things are intense enough and triggering enough. So.
Can I do a quick thing for what John was saying is so important? And here's a simple thing for people to get. It's in almost everything we do in any relationship, we're either trying to give a gift or receive a gift. And almost all conflict is when two people are trying to receive and nobody's giving, or two people are trying to give and nobody's receiving. And I get it in myself. I'm having some really difficult conversations with someone who's really important in my life right now. And we have to slow down. And it's like, okay, am I giving her the gift of listening right now? Or am I wanting to be heard? And if we both are wanting to be heard at the same time, nobody gets heard. And if we're both trying to give at the same time and so just ask this simple question. Am I giving a gift right now of listening and trying to enter their world and being curious? Or am I wanting to receive the gift of being heard? And that's a simple structure to tap into what John said. And Katrina, I'm just wanting to appreciate your vulnerability and how you shared your heart. And like, it touched me. And I watched, there's this instinct that almost comes up like, oh, I'm sorry I'm crying, or I'm sorry. It's like, I'm sorry I'm being real. And it's like the most precious thing. What I saw is how much you care and how alive and how real that is for you. And it's like Scott was talking about negative feelings. It's like there's feelings that are uncomfortable and hard to be with. Can we be with each other? Can we be with those feelings? Because those feelings are so critical. And the ones that I try to avoid tend to get me in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's what addiction is this desperate attempt to avoid a certain set of feelings. So I'm going to use drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever it is to avoid those feelings rather than be with them. And when I'm be with them, it grows a muscle. It's uncomfortable as all hell. And that's where breakthrough happens. Mm-hmm. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. There's a couple other pieces that I think might be helpful here. I so appreciate the idea of going back and forth. And sometimes in a mother-son dynamic, there might be a need for him to express and be heard by you a bit more. So I'm going to ask you to take time to listen. And I also wanted to share some other pieces that might be helpful. One is when you ask him if he would be willing to share some of what's really compelling to him. Also ask him, like, would you just do a little background check on the sources you've found to make sure they're really sound in your mind before you show them to me? Because I want to see the pieces you find most compelling. The way this can work is that there is a lot of stuff going around the red pill thread that if you just do a little bit of research, it falls apart in a heartbeat. And so encouraging him to take the time to, like, would you really see if it's a solid piece, might help him discover that a lot of the pieces he's looking at will fall apart really quickly. Another piece is that uh, in the red pill stories, there's always a promise that something's going to happen. There will be some big event. There will be the storm. There will be the great reveal. There's a promise of an upcoming event that's going to happen. And then it does not happen. And there's an explanation for why it's not going to happen, but then there's it's going to happen soon though. And they then push it out into the future. And this is another pattern inside of that belief system, that when there are some people, when they recognize, like, oh, this thing that's going to happen, that's going to make everybody in the world know that I've got the truth, keeps getting pushed off and keeps getting pushed off. And in fact, that's been part of that belief system. I understand it's been part of it from its inception. And so that it's another weakness in the narrative. So I wanted to give you some awareness of those. And again, I think what Paul said, it was such a good caution. When you try to convince him that he's wrong, he's likely to push back. But there are ways in which you can intelligently plant seeds that might help him question his own belief system in an intelligent way.
Thank you. I've got a couple things, comments from other people. Our anonymous mother says, sent a special thank you to you, Katrina. She said, Katrina's tears made it safe for my own to emerge. So, and isn't that the truth? Sometimes we need for it to be safe, to allow ourselves to have those uncomfortable emotions. And that's such a big part of our work, is to make it safe for people to have uncomfortable emotions, including anger. Making it safe for people to be angry, making it safe for people to cry, making it safe. And kind of along those lines, Carol Weekly wrote back, thank you for the distinction, kind of going back to Carol's thing for a moment. Thank you for that distinction, the difference between negative and uncomfortable emotions. Wow, an aha moment. I used to feel anger as a way of covering up other uncomfortable feelings. I now sometimes go immediately to gratitude as a way to avoid uncomfortable emotions. Thank you. And so thank you, Carol, for your honesty there. And I've actually brought up one of the things we use in Love Coach Academy. And this is really great teaching, and it's called the anger iceberg. All of us have certain emotions that we're comfortable with, that we go to. Often men are taught that anger is okay. Anger is the cover emotion for all the things that men don't want to acknowledge: embarrassment, nervousness, disappointment, sadness, right? So anger can be where a person goes to cover uncomfortable emotions. And again, that tends to be traditional with men. Gratitude is a cover emotion for people that consider themselves spiritual. And gratitude is great. So gratitude is my religion. It's important to be grateful. But I love what Carol said. Oh, when am I going straight to gratitude? To avoid my own anger, or to avoid those emotions that I think are negative or not spiritual. A lot of spiritual people think that anger isn't spiritual. Well, anger may not always be the most pleasant response, and we have to learn how to manage our anger. Absolutely, we have to learn how to manage it. but we don't want to stuff it. Remember, the Dalai Lama gets angry. Which leads to actually kind of the last thing I want to share on this round. I want to share one of my favorite stories. Katrina has heard it 264 times by now. But it summarizes where we want to go. The Dalai Lama allowed brain researchers to hook up electrodes to his brain and track how his brain works. Now, we've talked a little bit about how we can get abducted by our reptile brain. The reptile brain, which is all about survival, when we perceive the possibility of attack, our reptile brain takes over and we react through fight, flight, fear, freeze. I'm sorry, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are the 4 reactions of the reptile brain. The frontal lobe is where the observer part of the brain is and the empathy center of the brain is. In nonviolent communication, we would say this is jackal, this is giraffe. So when they were doing this research with the Dalai Lama, what they found that was remarkable was over a 90-minute period, his synapses entirely fired in the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe, never in the reptile brain, never in the reactive brain. Even when they started trying to really challenge him. Towards the end of the research, they showed him photographs of Chinese soldiers burning down a Tibetan temple. And mind you, their synapses still firing and they're tracking where the synapses are firing. And the Dalai Lama, as he looked at these photographs, he wept. He didn't stuff his emotions, he cried. But the synapses were still firing up here, not back here. The lead researcher decided he would really try and challenge the Dalai Lama one last time. He said, well, how do you feel? What do you think about Chinese soldiers raping Tibetan women, murdering Tibetan people? And the Dalai Lama really slowed down and he wept. And a very long time went by. The synapses were still firing up here. And then finally he responded. It helps me to remember that I must pray equally for the Chinese as I do for my Tibetan people. This is the movement of the human species. We are moving from reptile brain reactive survival consciousness into frontal lobe, temporal lobe, thriving. You've heard us going from surviving to thriving. It is the movement of our species. Every human being further removed from an ancestral lineage of violence, the synapses naturally fire up here. Those individuals who either have had extreme violence in their life or an ancestral lineage of ancestral violence, there's still more of a reptile brain reactivity, not because they're bad or wrong, but because they have had to be more in a survival consciousness. We're moving from surviving to thriving. So I want to complete this thought. How do we do that? How does the mother who's in so much pain and wants to resolve this incredible dilemma, we have to slow down. I want to just really emphasize slowing down is the, I think, most important step. Because when we go fast, we can only react. We can only react when we go fast. There's that wonderful quote by Gandhi, nonviolence takes a very long time. So we have to slow down. We have to feel our feelings. We have to differentiate between our judgmental thoughts and the feelings connected to those judgmental thoughts, and then the precious needs underneath those judgmental thoughts. That takes time to slow down, get in touch with it. So when it's crunchy, when it's difficult, slow down. Self-empathy, and then empathy for others. So that'll actually be kind of my closing thought, because we're already well past 1 hour. And I'll give each one of you an opportunity to give your closing thought for the day. John?
closing thought for the day. Well, what came up as you were sharing there, Scott, and I hadn't heard that story. I really loved it for the first time. I was just thinking, about the way this phenomena of how language, we get swept up in the current of thought and language, and all the ways we're sort of talking about how to break the trance of that. Like, we fall asleep into that automaticity, and it's so compelling. It's like being in a movie theater and we just completely forget we're in a movie theater, right? But you just, the moment you wake, oh, I'm sitting in a movie theater, right? Now, if you want to enjoy the movie, maybe, but if it's a horror movie and you actually, it's nice to know you can be aware. And so, but I think being able to, we talked through today a fair amount as well about the body, coming back down into the body. And Scott, you were referencing it there too. And so as I listen to words being spoken, like right now, I'm hearing my own words, but like feeling, or when you were talking, Scott, or can I feel the sound of the words in my body? Can I feel the words? And it's like a listening with the body, a listening with the heart to those words. And I really believe like the words contain the pictures and images in the body. So if we listen deeply from the body to the words, we hear all that in the words. And then of course we can use words to help us connect to our feelings and needs and what we want. But yeah, I think what comes to me is to reinforce that idea of not, acknowledging what's up in the head, but then dropping down deeper, and that there's a way we can connect that up to language and communication, but just like in word by word emergence, that to me is so, it breaks that trance. It gives us a different capacity, maybe to be in the frontal part of our cortex and brain in this way. So that's what's helpful to me. And just to reference something we didn't directly talk about, but the nonviolence of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and how that relates to what we're talking about, this courageous meeting of violence, but in a way that transforms, in a way that transforms violence back into love. And we've just been talking about concrete ways of doing that by listening for the feelings and needs underneath. But that is nonviolence, meeting that aggressive energy with these skills, these abilities. And I think it's key for democracy. If we're going to deal with the polarization and the absolute out of control belief systems that are at war, we need to do what we're talking about. It seems like there's no other way to have democracy at this point, anyways, it seems. So thank you, Scott, for having us on, having such an important just conversation. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, John. It's really wonderful to work with you. We're going to hear from Katrina and Paul, of course. And just a reminder that we're going to do this again on Wednesday night, January 20th, the evening of the inauguration, from 5 till 7 p.m. It's going to be the show that John and Katrina and Paul have been doing, called Across the Aisle. And we're going to do a special 2-hour version, because obviously that's going to be a big day of change. So just before we go to Katrina and Paul, I'm going to just promote this for a minute. And joining us will also be Corey Tyler. He's an Agape licensed spiritual practitioner, and also who's been doing Across the Aisle with Katrina, John, and Paul. And then I've invited, just so we have some Saturday Night Alive style inspiration, to have some music. I've invited Shayna Gladstone. You might know her as Sister Stone, and she's a wonderful musician. Who's very connected to Indigenous peoples. We'll be playing some music. So it's going to be this Wednesday night, January 20th, 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. You can find it
6 to 8 p.m.
6 to 8. Thank you. 6 to 8 p.m. It'll be on this, if you're watching us on Facebook, all the Facebook channels and the YouTube channels, but we'll also be promoting it, and you can come into the Zoom room. So Katrina, Paul, which of you wishes to?
I can step forward. What a rich conversation. I feel really grateful that we created this morning all together. And, to sum it up, we are doing the very challenging work of releasing our need to be right, this heady part, right? This reptilian brain, amygdala part, this reactive part, the need to be right. And we're seeking to move into that need to be connected. I may not agree, but I love you so much.
Mm.
So, yeah, thank you. Really appreciate all the wisdom shared here today. And I hope that anyone watching will come and join us for Cross the Aisle on Wednesday.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you, Katrina. Paul.
Thank you, everybody that joined us today to be in the uncomfortable conversation. It's like I want to run to comfort at times, to be right, and being in this ambiguous area is really challenging. But what I ask you is to lean in. So in communicating, we get one of two things: we get resistance, resentment, regret, and lean out, and that's where we like have that hard right wrong world, or we get connection, cooperation, and compassion. And I'm constantly leaning towards the connection, compassion, and cooperation. And there's days recently I was on a phone call where somebody says, you teach one thing and you behave another different times. And I'm like, at first I'm resisting, going, no, I don't. And then I looked at it later and I said, you're totally right. There's days that I suck at this. And it's just like embracing something Scott that says all the time is how perfectly human. I am so human. And it's a constant choice. It's like, I wish I could go to the gym once a year and like, damn, I got it. I've worked out for the year, but this is a constant, never ending muscle that we're building. And it's a relationship gym. So it's not only in a big political thing, it's on a day-to-day basis with family, like this beautiful woman said about with her son and her husband. So it's the little picture and the big picture. And thank you, Scott, for just such a dedication to creating a sacred, safe space for this type of communication to happen.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And there are actually a few comments that I always like to acknowledge our viewers. So Bonnie writes, and this is a lovely parting thought. Bonnie writes, first, separate knowing from believing. Have an understanding between the two. Usually conflict gets held in the category of knowing. Once you can see the conflict in belief, the door could be opened just a sliver for difference without wrong. Then peace can be found in the sliver. That's sweet. Peace can be found in the sliver. A lot of people thanking us. And Margaret says, slow down. This is such an important reminder for me. I have a quick intellect that I'm so proud of, but maybe this fast thinking analysis is actually impeding my safety and growth. Woo, boom. I think we all can relate to that. I sure can relate to that. Going from my quick mind to my heart is my lifelong journey. That's my lifelong journey. Aura Deva asks a difficult question, and we could do an entire show on this question. She writes, if the mainstream media is controlling the narrative and silencing voices of another narrative, how do we know what's real to fast check, as you suggest in dissolving the red pill story of the sun? Well, we really are pretty much at the conclusion, and we could do an entire show on that. But I will leave, as host, I'm going to finish with a thought, which is a response to that. Let's all make peace with, I don't know. Let's just all make peace with that. None of us absolutely know for sure from an objective place where coronavirus came from, how long it's going to last. None of us really know objectively what the real truth is about Trump or Biden or what anything is said in QAnon or not. We know what the media feeds us. And none of us really know to what degree there's this incredible mainstream media grip. Certainly there's, to some degree. Is it 100%, 80%, 50%? I don't know. And so if we can, again, recognize, when am I in a belief and when can we say, I don't know. I notice that I believe this. I notice that I'm attracted to believing this. But none of us really know about a lot of that outer stuff. But you know what we do know? We know what our feelings are. We know what we need. And so if we can be less focused on what the media, any media, is telling us, and more focused on what we have control over. I have no control over what Joe Biden's going to do. I have no control over Donald Trump, but I have total control of how I treat Katrina or myself or my roommate Paul. That's what I have control over. I have control over how I treat the people in my world, how I listen to them, how I listen to myself. So I'm going to encourage us to, when we get lost in the external world, which is very seductive, how can we bring it back to what we do have control over, which is our own relationships?
So Scott, can I say one last thing? I know we've said last thing. I just want to give a shout out at some levels to Love Coach Academy, that people, if one of the things we all have in common is we've all had mentors, and to try to do this by yourself is overwhelming. So one of the things that Scott's made available is, if you go to lovecoachacademy.com, you fill out a survey and you can actually get a little bit of time with someone who can mentor you in the areas of relationship with yourself, relationship with your family, relationship with someone you love and care about. I think we're all here saying you don't have to do this by yourself. It's a challenging journey. Get a mentor, get some coaching, come and take like Scott's upcoming program called Relationship Essentials. Learn how to use these tools. These are not easy tools, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. Get support. So I just wanted to say that, Scott, and Scott's dedicated 20 some years to creating amazing tools, and I've dedicated my time, and Katrina and John, find somebody that you respect and get support.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, you can get support from Katrina and her Love Smart cards and her coaching, support from John Kenyon. We didn't do the promotion for everybody, but you can go to lovecoachacademy.com to find Paul or myself. How do people reach you, Katrina? What's the best way to reach you?
Lovesmartcards.com for me.
Okay, and her Love Smart cards are amazing. I'm lit. Talk about. Oh, you got them. I was going to go grab them. I'm looking at them.
Okay.
My dog even is excited about Love Smart cards.
Yeah.
So great. They're beautiful. It's a wonderful way to learn. And John, how do people reach you?
JohnKenyon.com will do it.
Okay. All right. My dog is barking. What a beautiful show. Thank you, everybody. And looking forward to continuing this on Wednesday night. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And again, if you're watching the replay, because most of you are watching the replay, you can still put comments in and we'll do our best to go back, or I'll at least go back and respond as best as I can. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful, sacred Sunday.